Awesome. So we'll get started without further ado. Welcome to the Grants and Proposals webinar for fiscally sponsored projects. Thank you so much for joining. Like I said, I'm recording this session and we'll send out the recording and slides before the end of the week for everybody who registered. There will definitely be time at the end for questions, but also feel free to use the chat functionality on the right-hand side of the screen to type questions as we're going. Okay, fantastic. So just to get started, in the not so distant past, my colleague Diane had an idea for something that she wanted to launch for artists and designers. It was based off of the Springboard for the Arts community supported art program. They're an awesome arts service organization in St. Paul, Minnesota that has helped spread the CSA for Art model across the country. Basically, a CSA for Art is a subscription service for locally produced art and design, following the model of community-supported agriculture, in which shareholders invest in a local farm and receive a monthly share of fruits and vegetables. CSAs for Art connect shareholders directly to the arts community. Shareholders receive pieces of artwork instead of vegetables. So, Diane rushed ahead along with a amazing friend and collaborator, and the Brooklyn CSAND was launched. One of the first things they did was get fiscal sponsorship from Fractured Atlas. Yay us. Diane and her collaborator knew they needed money and someone to help them manage. They had a $50,000 annual budget, and they knew they couldn't manage it on their own. They had an incredible first season. You can actually see Diane on the right, handing people their art, and managed to get by through earned revenue and donations from friends and family. They decided for the second season to apply for some grants. They followed all of Fractured Atlas's advice about how to search for grants, which I promise we will get into in a minute, with the exception of one major mistake. They did not give themselves enough time and were literally writing a grant at the last hour. Needless to say, they didn't do their best work. The Brooklyn Arts Council was kind enough to provide them feedback on their application after their denial came through. The jurors found all of Diane's franticness throughout the application. This was some of the feedback that showed up. So how can you avoid this fate? I'm going to go over various factors that go into searching for grants, applying for grants, and creating a strong proposal. I thought we'd start by defining what a grant is. So grants are awards made by private foundations, corporations, or governments. They usually involve an application process. They are always made based on strict funding directives from a board or governing body. And awards may also be based on fiscal health and the administrative strength of the organization. Last year, a few years ago, our sponsored projects brought in over $17 million in revenue. 34% of the revenue was from foundation grants, 5% was from corporate funding, such as matching grants, 1% was from government grants. These are important figures to keep in mind when thinking about where your contributed revenue is going to come from and how much your ask amount should be in relation to your own overall budget. I will also note that over the course of Fractured Atlas Fiscal Sponsorship Program, we have helped our projects raise over $100 million in contributions, including grants. A few things to keep in mind before you begin looking for grants. Remember, not all grantors support artistic and cultural activities. Statistically, grants are the most competitive type of support that exists, and they have been decreasing each year. It is best to wait to approach a funder for grants until you've produced your work consistently for at least 2 years. So where do you look? There are many places to look. The first place to start is straight from the horse's mouth. Go to the source. If the funder has a website or a guideline or guidelines, start there first. The Foundation Center is the most comprehensive database of grants in the United States. There are 5 locations in Atlanta, Cleveland, New York, San Francisco, and Washington, D.C. I'm having some feedback that people are unable to hear me. Is that the case? I just want to check in. Can you make sure that you can hear me? Let me know during in the chat box. Okay, if you're having trouble hearing me, fantastic. Thank you all so much for your feedback. If you are having trouble hearing me, I suggest double checking the volume, make sure that nothing is muting on your end. Also, just in this question, the reason you all are muted is so that we don't have a bunch of voices competing with mine that can sometimes make it harder for people to hear. And if you're still having trouble hearing, again, you can reach out through support@fracturedatlas.org. I'll make sure that you get the audio, which is recording. So I promise that I'm sorry if you're having trouble hearing specifically. Again, keep me updated, let me know. But I will make sure that if you can't hear me now, that we will adjust and so that you'll get the recording at a later date. So back to where we are, the Foundation Center. Like I said, the 5 locations are Atlanta, Cleveland, New York, San Francisco, and DC. If you can visit one of them, I strongly recommend it. The staff at the Foundation Center is usually incredibly helpful, and they can guide you through how to sort through the many opportunities and their many resources. If you are not located in one of these cities, you can pay to use it online or visit one of the Funding Information Network locations throughout the United States to use it for free. It's a network of libraries, foundations, and other nonprofit resource centers. There are over 470 Funding Information Network locations throughout the U.S., so you should be able to find one located near you. Through the Foundation Center, you can find foundation and corporate grants. You can search by funding interests, type of support, etc. If you can see on the screen, each search line has something called View Index. That's a great tool. The View Index will allow you to pick particular categories that are already recognized in the database, so that way you don't have to try to type something new or worry about something not matching. You can see what their criteria are right there. Guidestar is another great resource when searching for grants. You can view past giving in the IRS 990. It's a PDF tax form. This document contains contact information for a funder, sometimes application information, and the amount the foundation has contributed to their grant recipients. It's free to create an account, and you can search for any nonprofit 501c3 organization. It's a little bit of a backdoor approach. If you think about an organization that is similar to yours and is a 501c3, you can look up their 990 and see who is given to them. Then you can look up those foundations. Once you identify the organization that you'd like to look up, check out their 990. This is a sample page from a 990. You'll need to dig a little. Sometimes a 990 can be 100 pages long. One of the first sections I always check is section 15. This will tell you if they are accepting unsolicited proposals and if they have any application requirements or grant restrictions in place. These are the grants and contributions paid for this particular organization for its 990. Here you'll be able to see who has received, who an organization has either received money from or awarded money to, and that's found near the back. It's generally included as a supplement to the 990 filing. Other than the Foundation Center and Guidestar, you should check out programs, brochures, and websites for products and organizations that are similar to yours. Who has given to them? Look at newsletters and blogs of service organizations and community foundations. They often offer lists of grants. Look also at civic and business associations in your area. They might list opportunities from local businesses. The Chronicle of Philanthropy, which aside from listing grant opportunities is also a great resource in general, is a news source for nonprofit leaders, fundraisers, grant makers, and others involved with philanthropy. It offers lists of grants, fundraising techniques, statistics, a calendar of events, and more. And last but certainly not least is NIFA a resource from the New York Foundation for the Arts. It can be a great and free place to search for grant opportunities. It's not the easiest interface and can take a little bit of time to sort through, but there are many opportunities listed. When you're going through these resources, there are a couple of things to keep in mind as you look at different grant opportunities. What's in it for each grant maker? Is your project's mission and purpose a funding priority of the grant maker? Does the grant maker fund in the geographical area where your project is located or where you serve clients? Does the grant maker make grants for what your project seeks funding for? For example, general operating support, program or product support, scholarships, endowment, capital improvements, and so forth? Does the dollar amount your project seeks fall within the range of grants typically awarded by the grant maker? For example, there are funders who say they only offer grants up to $5,000. So if your need is greater than $5,000, you shouldn't ask for anything greater than $5,000 because that's the most that they give. Sometimes as well, grantors say that they only fund a percentage of your project. So let's say in that same example, your need is $5,000, which is the biggest grant they give, but $5,000 is the entire cost of your project. If a funder says that they don't fund 100% of a project, they don't fund all of it, then you shouldn't ask them for $5,000 because that is 100% of your project. You want to make sure that you read guidelines both for specific numbers and for those types of percentages. One of our sponsored projects gave us this bit of feedback after working with us for over a year. I'll read it to you. So in 2010, I contacted over 100 foundations for support, over 75% of which did not even fund media projects or fund projects out of state. I realize now that the best use of time is spent in identifying the appropriate foundations. Once you know who has the potential to support your work, then you can apply, and that's the easy part. Woody Allen said 90% of success is showing up. I say 90% of being awarded foundation grants is applying for the appropriate foundations. Thank you, Fractured Atlas, for making sure I stay focused when applying for support for my organization. Chris Bacinelli, Executive Director, Bridge the Gap TV. So this is just one example of people who have used our services and realized that foundation fundraising is in fact not a numbers game. It's not about submitting the most applications possible and then hoping somebody funds you. That's like playing the lottery. It's closer to gardening, in fact, where if you plant the right seeds in the right conditions and take care of them in the right way, then you're more likely to get blooms. But planting the wrong seed in the wrong condition, no matter how many of them you plant, you may not get the plants you want. So once you've found grants that are a good fit for your project, you'll need to get ready to apply. You need to begin by reviewing and obeying all of the guidelines. Determine if you need to send a full proposal or a letter of intent or inquiry, otherwise known as an LOI. Determine your ask amount. which should never be 100% of your budget. Again, reading the guidelines is the best way to understand if a project or a funder is an ideal fit for you. You want to know, you want it to be mostly a yes. You want to be able to have a very strong connection to their funding priorities and to the work you're doing. And you don't want to ask them to fund all of it. Again, very rarely is that the case. Get your budget or budgets ready. If you've never built a budget before, check out our budget building webinar for guidance. You can also email support@fracturedatlas.org to get a recorded version of our webinar. There are several resources online as well if you have more questions or if you want to try a bit on your own. Determine if the funder accepts proposals from fiscally sponsored projects. If you come across any foundations who don't, please let us know, and we'll encourage you to reach out to the foundation to discuss this with them. Sometimes we have records. If it's a funder we've already worked with, they can will let you know the best way to proceed. But if it's a funder we haven't worked with, it's best to reach out to them, build that relationship, see if you can find out how they work with fiscally sponsored project or what's new. Track your activities and outcomes so you can express why they should fund you. That is very important. Make sure you know who's coming to see your productions or who's experiencing your work. How many places has your work been seen? What have you spent? What is your funding? How have you used funds that you currently have? You want to make sure that you can track and record and report to these funders when the time comes. And what are your results? Show them that you have something to offer. This many people experienced my work. We served this many members of our community. We created this many pieces of art. There are multiple ways to show outcomes, but you do have to show them. Something that just says, well, this event happened is not as compelling as this event happened and we got feedback from these audience members and here are our photos and here are our work samples. Like, the more you can document what you've done with what you have, the more likely you are to get more funding to support continuing to do the work. So now it's time to get your LOI ready. That's either your letter of intent or a letter of inquiry. An LOI is basically a mini proposal. Don't send blanket LOIs or proposals to numerous foundations. They can tell. You'll need to spend time making sure you explain to each foundation why you're a good fit for their funding priorities. It's the same as applying for a job or even trying to meet a potential romantic partner, right? There are things that are core to you that you want to present in the best light forward, but you also want to tailor your communication or your relationship to whomever you're talking to. That really applies for funders. They have priorities, they have needs, they have things that they would like to see. And you want to make sure that your proposal doesn't just talk about you and your project, but talks about how your project helps align with and further their mission and or their funding priorities. A standard LOI is 3 pages long unless otherwise specified by the funder. I will say that we're going to give you these guidelines, but the first and only guideline is do what the funder asks, as far as if they have a particular font they want, if they have a typeface size they want, if they have a length requirement. Really pay attention to those guidelines and to the needs of the funder. If we've said it's 3 pages long, but the funder has said that they don't want anything longer than 1.5 pages, then stick with that. They're the ones who are determining the fit, and those guidelines mean something. Most LOIs should include a summary and project description. So this is a very condensed proposal, but it should still have the information of a proposal. You want to make sure that you are presenting as much information as you can about your project and your work within the guidelines. The LOI should also include information on project leaders or key artists. Budget information like basic cost, how much is already committed, and your ask should be included in your LOI as well. Time frame is also helpful. When is your project taking place? Does your time frame match the funder's priorities for when they want the grantee to spend the funds? You don't want to you don't want to do a grant process for an event that's happening in 3 weeks. It is rarely it is rarely able to have anything turn around that fast. And if grantors feel that they can't support it or don't have enough information, they aren't going to turn their processes around, or they're going to change their processes just to fund your project. That just never happens. So be mindful of when your project is happening and when the funder's guidelines are. Share your objectives and deliverables. Describe your process for how you'll evaluate the success of the project. Again, saying this happened isn't enough. It's not as compelling an argument, but saying this happened and we want this to happen and connect to this community, or we want to, do a play that has not been done before, or, give a voice to these types of authors or artists, or however you define success. You're welcome and open to define success for you, but it's important to communicate to the funder what success looks like. Make sure to include your ask amount up front. Also how much you've raised to date and how much you need to raise. They want to know what you've done so far and what you need them to help you do. When you're ready or invited to send a full proposal, follow the guidelines and be prepared to send any combination of these items. Funders are allowed to set their own requirements, so you are able to see exactly what you can have a standard of materials prepared, but for each grant or each funder, you're going to have to provide different materials. So that is, know that you'll need that. Some of this will be requested from Fractured Atlas, which is why when you're applying for grants through us, we do have that 10 business day review period. This makes sure that we can pull the necessary materials together and make sure we can support your application. When writing the proposal, keep these tips in mind. Be careful with adjectives like unique and exciting. Be prepared to back that claim up. Don't write in flowery language. Keep it succinct and informative. Remember, they don't know you. Make sure you're telling them the things they don't know about you and your work. I'm a theater producer, and so I have to make sure that people know the context under which I'm producing. I produce mostly historical works by artists of color, and I know I can't just say a play's name and have a funder respond to me, partially because one of the tenets of my mission is I do work that is little known or that is not as popular. So by definition, the funder isn't going to know the type of work I would like to do. So I have to explain in my grant applications why I'm doing this type of work. And provide just the facts. They don't need a ton of embellishment or opinions from others. I suggest keeping quotes from others out of your proposal unless they ask for recommendations from others. You can also include that type of material in your supplemental materials, particularly things like press, or if you do surveys, those types of responses, succinctly. If they ask for supplemental materials or supporting materials, then you can use the supporting materials to let other people talk about you. You shouldn't editorialize about your own work. You should, if necessary, quote people who have talked about you. So you do all that and then you get funded. Yay. You should send a thank you letter to the funder immediately. You should also mark your calendar with any reporting deadlines. As long as Fractured Atlas is made aware of these deadlines, we'll also mark our calendars and remind you of upcoming reports that are due. it's important that you keep track. We fiscally sponsor over 3,800 projects, so I can't promise that a deadline that we can keep track of every deadline all the time. Be responsible for your reporting and your grant requirements, just to make sure that you are fulfilling what you need to fulfill. Sign the contract, or have your fiscal sponsor sign the contract. It depends on the type of contract, and it depends on what is necessary. So once you are rewarded, you'll review the contract and it'll tell you who needs to sign it. You should also include the funder on invitations to events. If this entity funded you, if this foundation funded you, you should let them know when the event is. See if they have an email address that you can add to your mailing list. Let them continue this relationship with you because they clearly responded to something in your work. Include the funder in the programs and or credits. Tell everyone who has worked with you. That's an important moment. And like I said before, start tracking your expenses, impact, results. That way you'll be ready and prepared at reporting time. Funders like to brag on their fundees. They like to say, our funds helped make this project reach this many people, or helped, this artist show this many more times. It's a great opportunity to showcase your work and to, again, build a relationship with the funder. If the funder knows that you have good data and that you have good information, they are also being more likely to invest and promote your work in service of that relationship. So what if you don't get funded? Which can always be disappointing, but it's still the first step in the relationship. Ask the funder if you can stay in touch. If the funder allows it, put them on your mailing list or send them your event postcards. Again, a rejection, or at that point, isn't a rejection of you or the type of work you do. It may just be that this funding priority didn't match this time. But a lot of times funders keep an eye on who's making work, who's kind of in the universe making art that they could consider. So know that a no is not the end of a relationship, but the beginning of one. And try again. Sometimes you have to apply 2 or 3 times. If it's a good match, try again. Ask for feedback. You can get feedback from program staff on your proposal if they offer it. And look on the bright side, you've now written a lot of great material you can use in other proposals. So definitely view it as a glass is half full. Keep in mind that Fractured Atlas needs to review your proposals and LOIs before they are sent. Now, we're looking for the standard text for grants that's available in your program manual and also from the My Fiscal Sponsorship page. We're looking for an appropriate ask amount. We're looking at your budget and your proposal makes sense and that you follow their guidelines. We aren't going to edit your proposal, but we will give you feedback on making it stronger. So send us the proposal narrative and your budget. We don't necessarily need the supplemental materials, but we do require 10 business days to review all these materials, so please plan ahead. Send us the proposal narrative and your budgets, right? Oops, sorry. These are excellent resources for recommended reading for your grant writing. The only grant writing book you'll ever need is Fantastic Artist Guide to Grant Writing by Gigi Rosenberg. I also strongly suggest a book called The Ask that helps to talk about writing for your nonprofit cause. So we are almost done. We're going to get ready for questions in just a moment, but I just want you to know that there are additional webinars in this series. All right, you can do Intro to Fiscal Sponsorship, Orientation for Accepted Fiscally Sponsored Projects. All of them are there. You can also access these questions from our Fiscal Sponsorship page. From the knowledge base, you can see a video of this. And if you have anything else that you need, I'm happy to open it up now for questions. So let me know what I can answer for you. There we go. Here's one. This question is trying to get started with grants. There's a question about the $1,000 grant eligibility requirement. Do donations of time and service count toward the $1,000 we need for the grant eligibility requirement? That is a very good question. So start, just in case anybody is unfamiliar, I'm going to start by explaining the grant eligibility requirement. What that means is we have received feedback from funders that say that they want to see a base of support. They want to see that you have donors who are willing to contribute financially to your project before they can support it with grant funding. So because of that, donations of time or services do not count toward the $1,000 grant eligibility requirement. It has to be contributions, previous grant awards. You can send us a link to if you've done like a Kickstarter or Indiegogo or other type of crowdfunding campaign in support of your project. Funders really want to see that people have made a financial contribution to your project, because no funder really wants to be the only one funding a project. That very rarely happens. I hope that answers your question. Fantastic. I'm not seeing any other questions. I'll give it 1 or 2 more minutes just to see if, oh, there we go. This is a good question. What if you are unsure of your budget or your budget changes every show? That is a very good question. And funders even understand that budgets can be living documents, right? Let's say you get extended, all of a sudden your show triples, or if you're doing a different type of show, it's hard to manage. Your best bet, however, is your budget needs to be an educated guess that shows how much it would cost, not even necessarily how much you have to pay, but how much it would cost to execute the project in the way that you feel it needs to be done. So that is why generally funders ask for a budget at the beginning of the process and then ask for a financial report at the end. They want to know, they understand that they want to get a sense of what your project looks like, but they also want to know what actually happened, what your actual spending was once the project was live. So it's important to use your resources, make your best guess as far as your budget. If you know your show takes 10 people and you're going to pay each person a certain amount of money, then you have, your contract line there. Or if you know that these are the types of venues that I want to use, they're about this much in this location, like you can make an average, or you can see like what is the most expensive space in that, because it's very probable that you could end up paying that. But you really just want to make a series of informed and educated guesses that show what your project could cost, knowing that it will grow or shrink. Let's say you get all the funding and you get all these deals, and next thing you know, it's less than you thought. But having the budget as clear and as close to accurate as possible will make your proposal stronger, and you can then always adjust in the reporting. As a fiscally sponsored project, we are not actually a nonprofit organization. How do we promote ourselves with the benefits of fiscal sponsorship, and what is the best clear wording? We do have the standard text that's available in your program manual that clearly shows the fiscal sponsorship relationship. Mostly you talk about what you do. What are your activities? What are the things that you are producing? We are not, because we are not executing your projects, we don't necessarily fit into your narrative. Your narrative talks about the work that you are executing. So when you're talking about your project, focus on what you do. And if you have specific questions about when you're talking to a specific funder, feel free to just reach out to us and we can talk a bit more about that case by case. This question, do you include a salary for yourself in your budget? Yes, you should. You should include, your time is valuable. And so you should include the time that it would cost for you and your collaborators. You don't necessarily want that to be like 90% of your budget, but it's helpful to account for your time and the value of the work that you're putting into a project. Funders do know that paying artists is part of a project, part of a budget. This is what if your expenses are to pay honorariums for team members? Is this common? Yes, it is common. And yes, you should include that in your budget. If you are paying something, if someone is getting paid, they should be included in a line item in your budget. This question, do you include grant writing fees? Yes. If you are hiring a grant writer, you should include that in your budget. That can be an administrative cost. Just as a best practice, your grant writers ideally should not work on commission. That is a frowned upon practice in hiring grant writers. Your grant writer should have a fee for their time that is independent of whether or not you are awarded a grant. They should be able to provide you with quality and a basis of their fee outside of a percentage of the grant award. But you can include their fee in your budget when applying for grants. Oh, to clarify, so if you're doing the grant writing yourself, do you include the fee in your budget? That depends. You can, but mostly I would include that as part of your time as either product director or lead artist or anything like that. If that's the work you're doing, I would include that in your kind of artist's fee. Are there any additional questions? Right. Well, thank you all so much. This has been an excellent webinar. I'm very excited to have done this with you. You can always email us at support@fracturedatlas.org. We'll be happy to answer whatever you may need. And I wish you all the best of luck in applying for your grants in the future. I'll be sure to send an email that has a link to where you can see this recorded webinar online. All right. Thank you all, and you have an excellent day.